I'm going to visit Miss Pat, and I thought on my way over there I would do my Sunday rant. I may be able to upload it while I'm at Miss Pat's. She's in a nursing home. And anyway, here's my rant. And I got to thinking about this a couple of days ago when I could not find my 12-foot Stanley tape measure. And I watched that thing like a hawk. And I don't loan tools, and I'm going to tell you why. Starting probably almost 30 years ago, I had a crowbar. And this doesn't seem like much to most people, but I have an attachment to my tools, and when you use a certain tool a lot, you form a, I'm not going to say bond with it because it's an inanimate object, but you form a liking for it and a preference for it over other tools that might do the same job, but since you're not used to that particular tool, you use the one you're used to all the time, and you develop an affinity for it. Well, that crowbar was a special crowbar because I had modified it, and it did a particular job I needed it to do, and in its modified form. Well, a neighbor borrowed it to tear apart a doghouse, and he used this thing for about 30 minutes, and within 2 hours he lost my crowbar. And he blew it off like, he said, well, I'll just buy you a new one. I said, no, you won't buy me a new one. That crowbar I've had since I was a very young man. I modified it to do a particular job, and it turns out I liked that modification, so I used it all the time. And you've lost it, and you can't replace it because it's, you know, one of a kind. So I didn't loan tools for many, many years after that. And then my next door neighbor borrowed my tiller. Now, it was a 2-stroke tiller, and I explained to him that you could not put regular gas in it. You had to put 2-stroke. So I gave him the gas can with a 2-stroke oil and gas mix in it. And I went to work. And 3 weeks later, my wife and I come home, and he didn't bring my tiller back, and it's in his front yard. So I go over there, and I say, you done with my tiller? He goes, yeah, that thing quit working on me, man. And, you know, this thing isn't, you know, I work on engines, and I keep my equipment in tip-top shape. He had put regular gas in it and burned the engine out, and didn't offer to buy me a new one, didn't offer to have it fixed, and gave me the gas can still full of gas. Didn't use a drop of my gas, used his straight gas in it, and ruined it. And that was a $400 lesson. So again, years go by, I didn't loan anybody tools, and I hired these people to put aluminum siding on my fascia. I had one side that was not covered because it was where my carport was, and when I took my carport down, I had to replace the fascia because that's where it was attached. And I had the aluminum siding, I just didn't have a brake big enough for me to bend 8-foot sections of it. So I hired it out, and these two fellas show up, $300 cash. It was a lot of money to bend 45, 48 feet of aluminum, my aluminum, and they didn't have a tape measure. So I reach into my toolbox in my truck and let them borrow my 25-foot rule, my tape measure. And they finish the job, and I give them the cash, and they take off, you guessed it, with my tape measure. So there's one tape measure missing. I had to buy another one, I replaced it. And then along the line recently, somebody borrowed my 12-foot rule, my 12-foot tape measure that I watch with a hawk, and it's my favorite tape measure because to me, when you're doing small projects, 12-foot is the perfect length, and it's the one I carry all the time. So that got lost, and I replaced it. And nobody looks at your tools and appreciates your tools and understands that your tools mean more to you than just tools. And they're hard to come by, you know. Tools aren't cheap, and they're getting more and more expensive. So anyway, that's it. Done. No more loaning tools ever again. And now for a funny story. Trucking story. I was pulling flatbed, so I was a very, very young man in my early 20s. And in them days, you could park along off-ramps and on-ramps, and cops wouldn't run you off. Unless it was daylight. I mean, if you pulled over to go to bed at night, they'd leave you alone. If you were there during the day, they'd run you off. And there's a reason for that, but I won't go into that. So, you know, sleeping in my underwear, and in the middle of the night, I gotta pee. Well, there's nowhere to pee except outside, unless you carry a jug, and in them days, I didn't carry a jug, because it was just me. So, you know, it's 3 in the morning, it's pitch black. There are other trucks parked on the side of the road, but everybody's lights are off. So I slip my feet into my boots, I hop out my passenger door, and I step in between my fuel tank and my tires and go to peeing. And about that time, the door that I left open swung shut. And you'll probably guess where I'm going. Yeah, the door lock was still locked. It was them really old truck. I think it was probably a late 80s model truck where you still had to manually lift the button up and push it down. So there I am in my underwear with nothing but boots on and no way to get back into my truck. So what would you do? And it was very, very cold. So I did what any self-respecting truck driver at 3 o'clock in the morning in his underwear would do. I started knocking on doors, asking for a screwdriver, because it was a Freightliner, and it had this little window in the passenger's door, way down by the floor. And they put them windows in there thinking that you'd have a little more visibility, because that is a real blind spot on an 18-wheeler right below the passenger's door. You can hide a whole car in there, which is why they started putting spot mirrors on the hood, so you could cover that blind spot. But anyway, that's the only way to get in the truck now. And I've done it before for other people that lock themselves out, but I got to have a screwdriver. So, you know, when somebody gets over the shock of seeing a man in his underwear knocking on their door in their cowboy boots, I finally got a screwdriver, and boy, by the time I got that little glass window pried out of that rubber gasket, I was ready to get inside. There's my funny story. Have a good weekend, y'all. Yeah, just chilling. Okay, I'm not.
Brian, you remember those little chairs I looked at yesterday at Ivan Smith?
Yes.
They would go perfect. Those little small chairs, Evan Zoo.
Yeah.
What
Okay.
What are you doing?
You're going on my video. That's what we're getting. 2 of them.
2 of these.
And 2 of
Okay, look.
these with USB ports.
Show the chair.
Okay.
Okay, Lucy. Right here, Lucy.
Lucy, and then you got enough room for 2 more dogs.
Sunny here.
And we're going to be fighting over who gets the dogs.
You would have Breezy on your side. This is a me and Lucy chair.